If there was one thing Yuri despised, outside of Lloyd Forger of course, it would be the yearly military balls that happened right around Valentine's Day. Not only was it a risk having most, if not all, highest-ranking officials of the Ostanian armed forces in one place, but also the simple fact that the more older gentlemen in the military brought their children to the events. Yuri came from a poor family, his sister being barely able to keep both of them alive after whatever happened to their parents. So having to listen to people he would consider children talk about how great they had it, and how things he wouldn't even have dreamed of as a child as being so nonchalant for them, just filled the second lieutenant with resentment and disgust. Luckily, he was great at hiding it. Annoyed, he stared at his invitation letter. As per usual, it had the option to invite someone else to accompany him. But who would we bring with? His beautiful sister, didn't know about his secret life in the SSS. He'd die knowing if she was worried about him. And by God, how would she react if she knew how many people he had either executed or had signed off on their execution? She'd never understand. And she would probably hate him. He could never live himself if she ended up hating him. So, as per usual, he wrote a letter of acceptance to the ball, with the addition that he'd be coming alone. Though, one thing was fortunate about this. It gave him a reason to visit his favorite tailor. Sighing, the man stood up, checking his wristwatch. He had 2 interrogations and one more target exercise before he was free to go. Thank God, Yuri always did his paperwork in the morning. You sat in your bedroom, bored, having your nails filed by a servant. Your father participated on these stupid events in hopes you'd create useful connections with other higher-ups, preferably their sons. Always in preparation for this stuff, he showered you in gifts, pretty dresses, visits to salons and spas. Your father, Colonel Briggs, really spared no expense. If only he showed this level of care for you all year round. You yearned for his attention and approval, though that didn't mean you enjoyed being used as a tool for his career. You lived in your family's mansion in the center of the military district. You were constantly surrounded by the most disciplined men of Ostania, and, as your father had put it, the most well-bred mothers and daughters of the country. Which always put an incredible pressure on you to perform. If Ostania still had something like nobility, you certainly would fit the bill for that. After your nails were done, it was time for your hair. You had washed it just an hour ago, so now it was time to oil it. Natural oils were gently massaged into your scalp to make it both easier to brush with less pulling and tearing, as well as making it more shiny and voluminous. That massage did feel nice, though. Afterwards, it was time for the dress fitting. Despite it being a high-class event, the dress needed to be just conservative enough to not offend the moral busybodies in the organizations. It was decided for you to wear a wonderfully pompous dark blue dress. That would just be perfect. The ball itself was held at a castle somewhere close in the Ostanian countryside. It had been the grounds of many conflicts in the past, and it still stood the test of time. It was an important monument to Ostanian pride. The castle had been renovated many times since then, had modern electricity, a wonderful central garden, was heavily guarded at all times, even had anti-air cannons on its towers. After you were made proper, you were guided by your mate into the dining hall of your mansion. where your father in full uniform was sitting at the table. The man quickly stood up and approached you as you entered. He smiled. "Good evening, my daughter," he said, his breath smelling of expensive cigars. He placed his large hands on your shoulders. "Still this meek little thing, I see." Everyone in your family was super tall, even your mother. Your two brothers being even bigger than your father. Though your father understood that the little thing that you were was more attractive to the sons of the military, so it was fine for him. Your father, Colonel Briggs, was incredibly muscular. He was bald, but had a thick blonde mustache right under his nose. Briggs was practically never seen without his uniform, decorated with his medals. However, there was a secret that he hid from everyone, even you. It was the fact that during the war between Vestalis and Ostania, he left his left leg on the front line. Only his wife, your mother, knew that he was wearing a prosthetic. "But despite that meek little body, you are the crown jewel of the Briggs family name." You blushed. You liked getting compliments from your father. Gently he tapped your cheek. Taking your hand now, he guided you to the car that was waiting in front of your mansion. Inside there was already a glass of white wine waiting for you, as your father sat down next to you. He looked at you with concern. "As an apology, because I can't be there for you more often. Also, I know you don't like these events, so..." You smiled. "Might as well make your daughter drunk to stomach it better." The colonel chuckled, but then you took the glass. "Thank you, father." The car ride took an hour. While it wasn't really glamorous to drive this long, especially in an expensive getup such as yours, the distance between your mansion and the castle was just right for one normal car ride. As the castle came closer, your eyes fell upon the spotlights illuminating the stone structure. Its most recent renovation had turned it into one of the most expensive hotels in Ostania, catering only to the highest payers, or military officials. You looked from the castle back to Briggs, whose face had been unmoving ever since you sat down. He looked out the window. "Father?" you asked carefully. "Yes, my daughter?" he asked curiously. "I have recently gotten into fencing. My trainer believes I could go pro within a year." Your father smiled. "Do you enjoy it?" You blinked. And after a moment of silence that seemed to take decades, "There really is no worth in attaining a talent or hobby if you don't enjoy it. Otherwise you will force yourself to do it and work yourself to death." He sighed, realizing that he sounded like he was scolding you. Truthfully, he was proud of you. There were so few interactions between the two of you, so why was he doing this now? He really didn't intend it. Briggs took a deep breath. What I'm trying to say, my daughter, is I hope you didn't sign up for that because you think I would like it. I want you to live your life without hardship. This is also why I wish for you to maybe acquaint yourself with one of those sons of the military." I know. Briggs chuckled. Thought it would be fun seeing you defeat an annoying suitor in a fencing match, though. You sighed in relief, taking that as the approval you had been yearning for. The car stopped in front of the castle's entrance, a butler opening the door for the two of you. Military balls such as this were huge events for the militaristic nation of Ostania. What made this event special was what it was celebrating. The retirement of Brigadier General Matthias Hughes. The man had been under the care of medical practitioners for a while and could no longer fulfill his duties. Wheelchair-bound due to having lost both legs, the old man was being accompanied by his therapist, Lloyd Forger, a very charismatic man. However, the moment he as much as mentioned the fact that he was married and had a daughter, your father seemed to lose interest in him personally, though not to his job, which officially meant it was time for you to mingle and leave your father behind. At least until he felt like introducing someone else to you. Or the speeches were held in the dining hall, as the food was served. In the meantime, you occupied yourself with wine and snacks served to you. Though as you tried to be part of the festivities, Yuri Breyer was having an anxiety attack. What the hell was the husband of your doing here? Why now? Why here? If he would see him, he'd tell his wonderful sister, worrying her with matters that she shouldn't worry about. Yuri was hiding and quite flustered inside of a toilet stall, making mental calculations. Right now, Lloyd was talking to Colonel Briggs. Briggs was a proud man, so most likely the conversation would last for a while if Lloyd accidentally brought up the man's family or career. Frustrated, he grunted. I know, seafood really isn't making me feel good either, said someone from the stall next to him before flushing. Yuri blushed, embarrassed. Until he was alone, he remained as quiet as a church mouse. Yuri sighed, opening the stall before walking to the door. Peeking out, he saw Lloyd still talking to Briggs. Though there was a path. Yuri narrowed his eyes. There wasn't any speech for him planned, thankfully. And this ball didn't have potential awards or medals given away. So he probably could skip out on dinner and hide in the castle gardens. The second lieutenant took a deep breath and blitzed through the hall, actually managing to not be seen by a singular person. Proud of himself, he took a deep breath outside. Maybe he should have become a career assassin, with how stealthy he was. Not that you would ever find out, but now he needed to game in some time. Yuri wasn't a huge fan of nature, so just looking at the trees and flowers in the garden wouldn't entertain him for too long. Especially since the climate in Ostania didn't really allow for anything exotic to be grown. The winters simply were too cold, the springs too humid, and the summers, way too hot. Really, the only time the weather in the country was wonderful was in autumn. Quietly, he walked through the stone paths of the gardens, trying to come up with a solution to his problem. He was in uniform, but also, luckily, the only SSS member present, lowering the chance someone talked about him to Lloyd. The Brigadier General would most likely stay here until late in the night, but probably leave around morning. Maybe you could hide in a hotel room. Though he'd give his name for the room, so no, that was a no-no. And as Yuri was thinking, he almost bumped into someone on a stone bridge atop an artificial river. "Oh, excuse me," he said, confused. Meanwhile, you just turned to look at him and smiled. "There's nothing to excuse, sir. You haven't done anything yet." He huffed. "Though I wouldn't mind the company." This looked like a well enough reason to stay outside, Yuri thought, so he gave in immediately. He smiled politely and then leaned over the bridge's railing next to you. "Is the hustle and bustle becoming too much, sir?" you asked. "Yes, very much so." "And you?" You exhaled sharply. "My father, he'd like me to find a spouse here." Like most daughters who were dragged into this, he thought. Interesting, because I don't think you will find someone out here. You smirked. That came from the attractive, mysterious guy who almost bumped into you. You thought, but instead you just innocently said, "Good point. Maybe I'm just trying to be more selective." He hummed. "And who are you to allow yourself to be more selective?" he asked, with a cocky smile. "I'm the third child of Colonel Briggs." Yuri looked at you in disbelief. He had met your brothers before. Giants just like your father. You chuckled when you noticed him staring. "Yep, I'm the runt of the litter, though, truthfully, I'm not being treated as such." Yuri had trouble to contain his emotions. Though, sure, your beauty was only outshined by his beloved sister, you didn't look like a runt at all. Probably sensing what he was thinking, you turned towards him. "May I return the question, then? Who are you?" "Mysterious stranger." He inhaled and exhaled before saluting you. "Second Lieutenant of the SSS, Yuri Breyer. At your service, my lady." "Well, I wouldn't mind your service," you thought. The man certainly was easy on the eye, no doubt. "Tell me more about yourself, Lieutenant. Someone as young as you, having such a high rank. I'm sure your story is long and probably not that peaceful." "My apologies, but normally I don't talk about such things on the first meeting." "Oh, do you?" You narrowed your eyes a little. "Truth be told, I'm sick of hearing of triumphs, of pride. I want to hear a person's story that doesn't hide anything. But I guess I was I was raised by my sister." Almost having lost interest in him, it was now reawoken, and you returned your attention to him. "I never met my parents, as they vanished when I was still very little. We lived alone, and for a very long time, my sister fulfilled every female role in my life. You know, she was a big sister, a mother, a babysitter, a maid." "You're attached to her. I'm guessing a lot, aren't you? You're speaking more about her than about yourself." Awkwardly, he scratched the back of his head. "Attached is an understatement. I joined the SSS with the singular goal of making this country safe keeping the peace, so she can live a happy life. Is she here? No. That's a dumb question. If she was, you wouldn't be here. You'd be at her side, wouldn't you? He blushed at your sharp observation skills. Smiling most evilly, he continued. Let me guess. She doesn't know that you're working for the SSS. A woman as caring as her, as you put it, would never allow you to take such a dangerous job as this. Though your conviction and the money it pays, they're enough for you to lie. Am I correct? He blinked, completely taken aback. Was this an interrogation? How quickly the tide turns, huh? After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth a little. Do you treat all men like this, or more specifically, all interactions? You blinked confused. Huh? Truth be told, I feel like I'm being interrogated. The sharp tongue, your eyes, sharp yet cold. You'd be perfect for the SSS. You smirked. Oh, really? Well, my father would certainly be overjoyed if I did so, but then again, he does wish I find an influential husband rather than join the armed forces. How about me? Thought Yuri for a split second, before almost unnoticeably shaking his head. What the hell was he thinking? Wasn't Yuri the only woman for him? Though probably not in that sense. And what surprised him was what you said next. Why that head shake? Okay, that's it. You're coming with him. Even if you weren't anywhere close to Yuri, he couldn't help but be incredibly attracted to you. And as the conversation continued, he tried to put more emphasis on making this a more casual interrogation. After all, you seemingly were doing the same. He yearned to hear more information about you. Who you were normally outside of this. Where your interests lied. You were the first woman outside of his sister to ever interest him. And soon, interest turned to a genuine attraction, as the questions became more personal. What movies did you like? Did you ever have any romantic interests? A question you had only returned by saying, I don't know. Did you? Of course you picked up on that. Small twitches in facial expressions, tiny shifts in his tone of voice, and the fact you had walked 4 rounds around the castle's pond without really realizing it. And eventually you took his hand in yours. He didn't reject you, something even he was surprised by. And suddenly, without either of you realizing it, you and him were in the castle's hotel lobby. With a blush, you had him order keys for the 2 of you, though he still made you sign your name in the guest's book. And once inside the rented room, the 2 of you ordered wine, and more wine, the mood becoming more free as time progressed. Until during a weak moment, you lunged forward. Not him. You. Wrapping your arms around him, pressing your warm, soft lips onto his. He returned the gesture almost lovingly. Not caring anymore, you sat down on his lap to put more force into the kiss. He gasped, and you moaned as your tongues intertwined, an elegant dance of warm muscle and wet salvia that tasted like alcohol. It was your first time ever being this close to a man who wasn't your father. And you wanted more. You needed more. Meanwhile, Yuri's eyes rolled back, drowning in the pleasure not even Yuri could give him. No, right now, only you could. You pushed him down onto the soft bed. Honestly, if you had planned to simply sleep, you'd have ordered for a more firm mattress. But this, right now, was perfect. After all, Yuri would truthfully be your mattress tonight. His fingers took hold of the zipper that held your attire together, while you began to unbuckle his belt. Neither you or Yuri would leave this hotel room undefiled tonight. And it would be up to the two of you to keep these feelings up until the next day. And if you managed, hopefully, you'd stay together. Maybe even forever. Hey, thank you for watching my video until the end. If you're new here, I hope you stick around and watch a few more. But before I say goodbye, I'd like to remind you to like the video and subscribe. I also have a Ko-fi and Patreon if you want to support me financially. And I also have a community Discord server. All links are down in the description. Hope you have a good day. Until next time.